Ladies and gentlemen, hey, hi, how you doing? Welcome back to the channel. Of course, the ultimate goal here in Call of Duty Warzone is to earn that victory, to be the last person or the last team standing. And as the days go by and as people become more and more familiar with the game, that can become increasingly difficult. But have no fear, I've got you covered, because today we are breaking down the most crucial tips you need to know in order to win more games day in and day out. So if you enjoy the video, or if you just find it helpful, let me know by dropping a like on it. And of course, if you're new here, I've got new Warzone content going up each and every day, from tips and tricks to class setups and all things of that nature. So feel free to subscribe with your notifications turned on to stay up to date with all of that stuff. Also, round 2 of Scuff Madness is going on right now, so if you want to grab anything from the Scuff site, be sure to use code IMMORTAL at checkout to get me one step closer to getting my very own Scuff controller. Anyways, Warzone victories. I've got a handful of them already, and I can say sometimes they are not the easiest thing in the world. You know, you could have a bad zone, there could be a lot of verticality in play, you could have a low amount of ammo or armor. There are so many things that could go wrong, especially late game, but there's actually quite a few things you can do to increase your chances of being prepared for late game. Now, one of the biggest mistakes that players are making right now is waiting too long to rotate. Some people might just be looting too much, you know, going full on loot goblin. Others may just be exploring and lose track of time. Whatever the case may be, rotating early and often is going to be one of the best ways to make sure you don't get caught between a rock and a hard place, with the gas chasing you from behind and a geared up enemy team waiting for you in front of you. Now, that situation is likely going to end in you either being sent to the gulag or just straight back to the pre-game lobby more often than not. And thus, getting those rotations down fast is going to be a major key to ensuring that you have at least some breathing room. Now, obviously, you can see the first circle basically right away, so you can plan your drop spot accordingly and just go from there. And then as the later zones start coming in, knock out that plan of action and get to the most ideal location and just rinse and repeat as the game continues on. Now, the next big piece of advice I can offer relates specifically to trios or any other squad-based modes they may have in the future, but it is a very important one nonetheless, and that is to pay attention to the flares. You know, occasionally you might be running to your next location, and then when you look over, you'll see a flare glowing in the sky. Now, at first, I was incredibly confused by this. I had no idea what that flare meant, but I quickly learned that flares go off when a squad member is bought back from a buy station. So when you are the one setting off the flares, that means you probably don't want to hang around that area for too long, because you basically just shot off a beacon that says, hey, we're down a member and we just bought them back, and they're probably not going to have a ton of loot right away. Which of course is a prime time for other teams to swoop in and try and get some easier kills. But also, the same situation then applies to you when you see those flares go off. If you hear them launch into the sky or you spot one in the air nearby, that then gives you the opportunity to head over and try and take that team out while they are a man down, or let you know, hey, there are players in that direction, we gotta watch for their rotation later on. So really, whether you're going for some eliminations out of it, or just simply using the knowledge to prepare for later engagements, paying attention to those flares is definitely important. Now, of course, you can prepare all you want to fight players, but really what ultimately matters is what happens when you do actually run into an engagement. And obviously, the most important thing you can do in Warzone is simply land your shots. But with the RNG looting, unless you are always using your dropkick classes, using different weapons can create an inconsistency in your gunfights, which is why learning the recoil patterns of the weapons you'll be using the most can be a major help in improving your aim. This was a pretty big tip I gave over in multiplayer at the start of the year, and really same deal applies here. So we do have predictive recoil here in Warzone, which means every single time you shoot a weapon, it'll have the exact same recoil pattern as before. So once you learn how the SCAR is going to kick or how the MP7 is going to kick, you can then counter that recoil just by moving your thumbstick or your mouse accordingly. Now, we also have to talk about vehicles because, as I'm sure you guys know, there are plenty of them on the map, but a mistake players can oftentimes make is actually overusing vehicles, which is not a good thing to do whatsoever. In fact, I try to only use vehicles when I absolutely have to, because 1, they are relatively noisy, they can give off your position just based off of sound alone, and 2, they also highlight you on the minimap as a bright red icon, which obviously is going to give any teams that see that a decent advantage over you, because they are going to know right where you're at. So unless you have to escape the gas really quickly, or you have a massive travel distance ahead of you to get to the next zone, simply staying on foot is going to limit the amount of information you give your enemies. Now, speaking of giving information to your enemies, another thing you can do to limit what other players might know about you is to use suppressors on your weapons. We covered this in the mistakes you might be making video I did the other day, and this is also a massive tip when it comes to winning as well, because using those suppressors is going to keep you off the minimap whenever you shoot. So be sure to use those on your classes so you can stay hidden as much as possible. And while we are on the topic, let's talk about your classes, or just your general setups in game, because what you do want to focus on here is going to be diversity. Whether it's with ground loot early game or your custom classes after you find a drop kit, having a class that is good in a variety of engagements is going to be key. So this means you want a class that will be reliable up close, but also at a range too. So like for me personally, I use a lot of sniper and assault rifle setups because ARs are going to be good up close and also at a medium range, and then long range I can use that sniper to take out enemies at a distance. And in general, having that diversity is going to help out a lot when it comes to not being at a disadvantage because of any range or lack thereof. Moving on, let's also talk about the high ground, because this is actually one of the biggest advantages you can give yourself really at any stage in the game. Having the high ground gives you the option to jump lower if need be. It gives you the option to back up and heal or back up and revive and all sorts of stuff like that. So when you can take the high ground, do it. It is absolutely 100% worth it. Then the next thing I would also recommend looking into is going to be that of the contracts, because all the ones we currently have available are super useful in their own individual ways. So the Recon Challenge allows you to see future zones, so that's going to be fantastic for rotations. The Scavenger Contract gives you an absolute ton of loot, and also the Bounty Hunter contracts essentially give you a mini radar, so once again, be sure to use all of those to your advantage. Now, of course, when it comes to engagements, you can hit all the shots in the world and still lose an engagement here and there, just because you don't have as much health as the enemy. And that is why armor in this game is vitally important. Grabbing those armor plates and carrying the max of 5 is going to ensure you can, I guess, stand the test of time, because armor is a serious factor in who wins and who loses any given gunfight. So when it comes to looting, armor should always be a top priority. Now, getting into our next area of focus, when you are playing with a team, whether it be in trios now or maybe in duos or quads or whatever else is coming in the future, communication is always going to be your best friend. You know, marking locations with the ping feature or calling out compass directions, and just generally making sure everyone is aware of where you're focusing or where some enemies may be is going to allow your team to be ready to take on an engagement. And teams that are always calling out are going to be way more confident in pretty much any and all gunfights. Then finally, the single most important tip I can give you guys is don't necessarily just play for wins, which I know might sound weird in a video like this based around tips for getting more wins, but just hear me out. There will always be those players who just play to win, and they'll likely wait at the very edge of the zone and slowly move in towards that final circle, and then when the time comes and there's 2 or 3 or 4 people left, all of those other players will be ready. You know, they're going to be warmed up, geared up, and probably have the advantage over that player that was just sitting there waiting. So that said, when you play to engage. Play to get comfortable at different ranges and with different weapons. Play to be as confident in your ability to win a gunfight as possible. And then that confidence and that ability to be consistent in your fights is going to lead to easier victories at the end of the day. Anyways, with all of that being said, that is effectively how you can get more wins here in Warzone, and that is going to wrap things up for today. If you guys enjoyed the video, or if you just found it helpful, let me know by dropping a like on it. And of course, if you're new here, and you want to stay up to date with the latest Call of Duty news and intel, updates and leaks, and pretty much everything else in between, feel free to subscribe with your notifications turned on. That way you'll always know when I post a new video. As I mentioned earlier, Round 2 of Scuff Madness is currently underway, So if you want to help me get one step closer to getting my very own branded SCUF controller, be sure to use code IMMORTAL on literally anything on the entire site. But once again, thanks so much for tuning in, and until next time, take it easy, have an awesome rest of your day, and I'll catch you guys later. Peace out.